It is a bit. And honestly, I didn't want to put this book down. But honestly, this book is just too boring. Defeating this massive slog is such an achievement. Reading this one feels to me it is a bit of having a deja vu. I will finally give the Bands of Mourning a... Hi guys, this is Dan. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I have a very exciting, fun video idea that I haven't done before and I want to give it a go. Like you may see from the title or maybe from the thumbnail, it is about to find my 5-star book. I think as a reader, the biggest joy we can all relate to is to find a book that can stay in your mind for good, maybe emotionally breaking you, or even a book that you couldn't put down, the ultimate 5-star book. So I am thinking in my March TBR, can I find the books that I would love the most? In this video, I will read all the books in my March TBR, documenting my true reaction while I am reading every single one of them and sharing my thoughts along the way. You may wonder, or by the time you're watching this video, it is either the end of March or the start of April. I may have already done my March wrap-up. What's the difference between these two videos? Essentially, in this video, what I want to do is to share my feelings while reading every single one of the books on my March TBR. Compared to like a traditional wrap-up, this one is on a longer form content, which I hope I can do. I hope editing me can handle it. This could be like less conclusive and less analytical, if you know what I mean. Basically, it is all the thoughts I have while I am reading. So you may wonder what books am I reading in this video. If you don't know, go check out my March TBR. But very quickly here, I have To Green Angel Tower Part 2 by Ted Williams, Crossroads of Twilight by Robert Jordan, The Rise of the Rangers by Philip C. Quinto, and at last, The Band of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. So hard to remember every single one of them. You can tell here, in March, I am actually reading quite a lot of epic fantasy, so it is a bit of a challenge for me. But never mind, the book I am reading now is To Green Angel Tower Part 2 by Ted Williams, the last book of the Memory, Sorrow and Thorn series. I remember maybe in the TBR video or wrap-up video, I said that I have a feeling this one is going to be epic or potentially be a 5-star read. I have just finished part 1 of this part 2 and I hope it is not too confusing. This book do deliver epic battles and political intrigue. This moment do shine and really engaging. After finishing part 1 of this part 2, it means that I am more or less 50% or over 50% into the story. One thing I did struggle the most is about the pacing. I would say the plot of this book can actually be divided into different storylines. We have Simon and Miramel. I hope I say it right because obviously I am not listening to the audiobook. After what had happened in the last book, Prince Joshua, Benabit, Tiamat, Rachel, and then Count or Count, how do you say his name? Iota? I'm butchering all the names here, sorry. You can tell already here, there are quite a lot of subplots. They all got their own problems they want to solve or maybe the goals they want to achieve. I would say that actually you can put these storylines into 3 main groups, but they don't really have like strong connection between each one of them. Which I think it would be okay if all of these storylines is like really fun, really interesting. But like I said, I did struggle with the pacing quite a lot of time. Let's say without much spoilers here, but the storyline of Simon in this book, do I really need every single detail of what he gonna explore? In my mind, I can imagine, I can picture how his storyline can potentially be connected to other characters in the future, later in the book. But the build-up itself is just too long. I don't even really care what Simon gonna explore, gonna encounter, what problems he may gonna have. I think it is down to a really descriptive writing style, or maybe Ted Williams just like taking his time to get to the point. Every time when I see the chapter is slightly longer, I am already like, oh shit, here we go again. I just can't really get into the story. I just can't really be really engaged in the story, even though it is the last book of an epic fantasy series. I also don't enjoy Mira in this book. I understand all the hardships she has gone through in the last couple of books and make her the person now in this book. But coming to this book, she is giving me a strong bitch energy. Don't get me wrong, I love her growth since the beginning of the story, but just in this book, she is a bit too cold. Yes, she wanna do something, she wanna help with what is going on and find her own solution. But why do you have to be so stone cold? I think one of the reasons to explain all the problems I have with this book is about when it is written. It is written in the early 90s. I remember The Wheel of Time, the first couple of books are also written around this same period of time, so you can really see how author at that time gonna write epic fantasy series. I would even say these two authors share some similar tropes, writing style, slow pacing, or even the good old difference between the man and woman. Men would never get what women thinking, and women can't get how or why men behaving in certain ways. I mean, compared to what we are reading now, like my February TBR, we have the good old epic fantasy series, fantasy horror, cozy fantasy, and romantasy. Even with like epic fantasy series that is written in this time, let's say the Bound and the Broken series by Ranka Hill, like you may see here. We are talking about like modern tropes or adding some other wow factors, wow elements. Let's say maybe charming magic system or like unexpected twist. So going back to Green Angel Tower or the series Memory, Sorrow and Thorn, series that is written 20 years ago, and you can really see how fantasy, this genre, has changed. Still, I need to finish to Green Angel Tower Part 2. I don't really want to DNF it even though I am not enjoying it because I am 50% into it already. So the next time you see me, probably I have already finished this one and I can give you some final thoughts to see whether my opinions would change later. So see you in a bit. I am back everyone. It is actually a couple of days later. I have been a bit busy because first of all, I need to finish to Green Angel Tower Part 2. And secondly, I need to film and edit my Fantasy Starter Pack video. It should be up 2 weeks ago by the time you're watching this video. If you're looking for book recommendation with like different fantasy subgenre, go and check that video out. But back to the purpose of this video, to find my next 5-star read. After finishing to Green Angel Tower Part 2, I can say it is not the case. I had such a high hope for this one, but it is a bit... I don't really know how to describe my feeling, but like I said in the beginning, this book was written 20 years ago and you can really see how much fantasy this genre has changed. In terms of the plot, it is like our characters have finished their side quest and finally coming together to defeat the final boss. One interesting point here is that majority of the characters, let's say Simon, Miriam, Tiamat or Prince Joshua, they are actually pretty scattered. So before reaching the climax of this conclusion, they are like finding a way out or escape from something on their own. Or it is like they are trying to put what they have learned together and solve the final riddle, because there are still some forewarnings that still have to make sense. I think it is quite smart to separate these characters and see how they're gonna do individually. At first, I thought Part 2 gonna be like Avengers assemble and beat everything down together, but it is not the case, obviously. And when we finally reach the climax, it is possibly the best epic battle I have ever read. Our main characters of course have to stop this evil plan, but at the same time the side characters would describe what is happening in the battlefield as an outsider. So in a way, we can see a more comprehensive picture of what is going on. The epic battle, this conclusion is really captivating, and possibly the first time I feel like I don't really want to put the book down when I read this series. First time ever. One minor complaint I would say here is I do want to see how everyone is doing in this conclusion. Without much spoilers here again, it is like some of the characters are like, you go first, I'll take care of it for you. Or maybe some other characters are fighting so hard while our main character is doing something. It is really brief, but I don't want to give out any spoilers. I hope you understand. When the ending came, it is like our characters telling other characters what had actually happened, rather than going through all those moments with them. I would prefer the later one because I feel like the plot is really interesting. I wanna see how everyone fight, what sort of shit is going on, rather than like, here is what had actually happened, so read it on your own. This also echoes with what I have talked about in the wrap-up for the first book, which is the Dragonbone chair. Maybe some of our characters fighting so hard in a battle and then by the end of it, they fainted or blacked out. The next chapter will be like, oh, you're safe now and let me tell you what's going on or what had happened. I just find it too convenient. Sometimes you can end a chapter like this, but not every time. How this battle ends or how this series is concluded, I would say is quite well. Again, without much spoilers, I would say everyone deserves what they got. The other major point here is about the truth and the twist. To be honest, I guess most of the things right. Maybe starting from the last book to Green Angel Tower Part 1, we already have some mysteries, some questions, and in this book there are some prophecies about the future. But because throughout this series, there are only a couple of very important questions that has to be answered, but there is just not enough smoke to distract you from the truth. So when that reveal comes, you won't feel, oh wow, I didn't think about it like this, but there are just too many clues to collect along the way, so you can probably guess the answer, or at least you can guess the truth, what it's gonna be like. Maybe not 100%, but you will know maybe certain characters are related to it, so it is not too shocking. So the reveal, the twist, the truth, or like the answer we finally got, I would say is actually quite underwhelming. In terms of the rating for To Green Angel Part 2, it is really hard to say because I didn't enjoy Part 1 and I didn't enjoy majority of Part 2. I feel like the pacing can definitely be much faster than what we have here. And I think certain plot, especially in Part 1, didn't really help develop the relationship it should be. One merit here is definitely the last battle. It is just so well written. It is possibly the best I have ever read as well. But to be honest here, I did struggle with the pacing quite a lot of time in this series, not just the last book. Things can happen much faster. At some point, I am just like so invested in it and nearly want to DNF it. So possibly To Green Angel Tower Part 2, I would give it, I hate to say it because it's such a popular epic fantasy series, but this book, I think it is like 3 star out of 5, and the whole series as well, 3 star out of 5. If you have time, want to check out how a classic epic fantasy series gonna inspire future authors, you can check this series out for sure. But if your TBR is quite full already, I think this series can really wait. Now I am actually reading the first book of the Echo Saga, which is Rise of the Ranger by Philip C. Quantrill. I am just like 15% into the story, so I couldn't really say much here. What I can say so far here is it is a multi-POV story. It seems to focus a lot on the old battle between human and elf, and the elves seem so upset because the human is taking over everything and ruin everything basically. So they try to come up a plan with the merfolk so they can do something about it. At the same time, there is like a character, time travel to now from the past, and that person, that character, wanna see the king at this moment. All I can say here, especially after finishing to Green Angel Tower, you can really see how fantasy, this genre, has changed in like 20 years. This book was written, I believe, in 2017, so it is like 15 years after this was written. Even though in the part I have read, there are quite a lot of world building, there is so much information to process, but the writing is just so accessible and the pacing is just right. So you don't necessarily feel like you are so overwhelmed by all this new information in a brand new fantasy world. I'm going to read a bit more of this book, and maybe when I hit the halfway mark, I can share more about my thoughts. So I guess I'll see you all later. So it is, I think, 2 days later since the last update, and I am already 70% into Rise of the Rangers. And let me say something real bold here. It is so much better than To Green Angel Tower Part 2. Did I tell you what this book is about in the last update? I don't think so. So very briefly, Rise of the Rangers is written by Philip C. Quintrell, and it is the first book of a 9-book epic fantasy series called the Echo Saga. But at the same time, it is also the first book of the first trilogy of this saga called the Echoes of Fate, and I hope this makes sense to you. So very briefly, the Echo Saga is like a very classic high epic fantasy series in which the human taking over the land of Elaine from the hand of elves long time ago. And coming to now, the elves want to come up with a plan to take back what should be theirs. But in here, there is like a secret evil plan. An evil elf called Aladri, I believe is how we call him, wanna get like a very special magical stone so he can summon the gods basically. In this first 70%, more or less 3 parts into this story, we are actually following a huge cast of characters, and I do mean it. From like a mysterious ranger, time travel to now by accident. He needs to work with like the Grey Coast who got like opposite working ethics to him. And they have to work together and escort a elf princess to meet a king. So it is more like a diplomatic mission, but of course there is like an evil force hidden beneath. We also got like a magic school setting, which offers another feel about this complicated plan crafted by the elves. From this first 70%, it is very intense already, and we can already tell how much some of the elves hate humans, because they have taken over what should be theirs and ruined everything they have developed. And I am totally hooked here by this book. Although the beginning could get quite info dumpy with all those like new jargons throwing to you new history that you need to learn, I just find the writing is very accessible and the pacing is just right compared to Green Angel Tower Part 2. There are enough world building that you don't necessarily feel overwhelmed by all this new information in an unfamiliar fantasy world that you haven't read before. There are also plenty of actions after actions. The fighting itself is really lively with different mythical creatures that you would expect in an epic fantasy world, and also elemental magics as well. No one is safe for certain in this book, and I mean it is just the first book of the series. This also built up some interesting yet complicated relationships between some of the characters. We are thrown into this conspiracy, but we only know just part of the plan. Like I said, there is like an evil force working underneath, but no one knows about it. So when the plot expands, it leaves room for readers to put every piece they have learned from different perspectives, different chapters together, and see who is the mastermind behind. but the writing is really accessible and the author will remind you some of the important points, so you won't feel like you need to work your brain a lot in this book. So far, you can already tell how much I enjoyed this book more than Ted Williams. If you are into epic fantasy but haven't checked this series out, I think you should do it. Like I said in my March TBR video, I said that the synopsis of this series sounds like the Bound and the Broken series by Ryan Cahill, another very popular self-published epic fantasy series. So if you are into the Bound and the Broken and found this kind of modern epic fantasy enjoyable, go and check this one out as well. You won't be disappointed. I am really enjoying this book right now. I am not sure can this be like a 5-star read because I think it is still too early to say so, but I think this one is definitely a solid 4. The next time you see me, I will probably finish this one already and I will share my final thoughts about it. And of course, most importantly, back to the purpose of this video, to see if this is gonna be a 5-star read. So I guess I'll see you all later. So it is actually much later and I honestly forgot when did I film the last update. The reason is that I really want to catch up with my TBR and that is a book that I'm still quite scared to start with, and of course I need to create content up here on YouTube. So I think it is actually over a week since the last update and I have already finished Rise of the Ranger by Philip C. Quintrell. Honestly, I had such a great time with this one. This is like a fast-paced but immersive epic fantasy book. In short, this one is like a very classic epic fantasy which our main characters want to stop this evil plan. Some of the elves, like I said, don't like human. They think that the human many years ago taking over what they have developed and basically ruined them all. But after sitting down and discussing what is actually going on with the human, they both agree that there is like a bigger plan, a mastermind behind what they have observed. There are still some more to do by the end of the book, let's say a regroup or meeting a very mysterious character that could affect the status quo. But here maybe because this one is like the first book of a brand new fantasy trilogy, we would know that all the problems the characters are having won't resolve so easily. The battles by the end of the book is really intense and epic, and honestly I didn't want to put this book down. Plenty of actions and you will never be certain about the outcome. I really enjoy the writing of this book. It is so easy to follow and accessible even though we are jumping in a fantasy world that we haven't heard of before, and the pacing is just right. It is enough to keep the momentum of the reader, to keep you like digging what is actually going on. I'll definitely check out the sequels in this series and the next book is already on my April's TBR. The only thing I would say can be slightly better is about the characters. Some of them did team up and bring out some interesting relationships. Let's say maybe they are having opposite beliefs or maybe they have some blood feud before. This part I would say is really entertaining and quite well written. But for the rest of the characters, I'm not saying that they are very bland and then like fade into the background, but I feel like I still got so much to learn about them basically. Overall, I think this book is like a very solid 4, not 5 yet. I think it is missing something. I think it could be down to the characters, but still, it is a really good start to a brand new fantasy series. After finishing this great book, of course, I have to go back to another very popular good old epic fantasy series, and it is The Wheel of Time. I have the 10th book here, which is Crossroads of Twilight by Robert Jordan. I am currently reading it on my Kobo because I have just ordered the hardcover of it and obviously hasn't arrived yet. I am actually over 50% into the story because I want to get a better understanding about what is going on before sharing my thoughts. But honestly, this book is just too boring. I know that this one is like the weakest link in this whole series, but it is just so... I'm speechless here. The prologue itself is already exceptionally long. I also read to Green Angel Tower on my Kobo, and usually a chapter, or especially for an epic scene, it could go up to like 80 pages according to my Kobo. But this book, do you know how long the prologue is? It is 240 pages according to my Kobo, which is like 3 times more than an epic scene in an epic fantasy series. Seriously? Really? Have to be this long? In the prologue, we are going to meet different side characters. Robert Jordan would remind us what they have gone through or what they are planning. But what I struggle the most here is about the pacing of this prologue. Every POV just takes so long to get to the point, and I would say there are quite a lot of unnecessary details along the way. But I do admit here, there's like a time gap between me picking up the 8th book and the 9th book, so I may forget some of the details, something that had happened in the past. But after finishing the prologue, I was more confused. I think at this stage, the group of characters that I struggle the most is about the Aes They're literally like everywhere and following different characters with their own agenda. We have, of course, the good old White Tower, but even within the White Tower, not everyone is having the same opinion. And some, of course, is following Egwene. Some may can channel like Elaine. Some may be following Ren, some may be following other characters like the Black Tower. There are also some mysterious players on board. Let's say Farine, let's say Kasuni, the legendary Aes. You will never know, you will never be certain what they are actually thinking because it is their way of doing things. There are just so many of them in this world, and how on earth can I remember every single one of them? What they are planning, what's the relationship between them gonna be like? There are just so many details. After this very long prologue, we are finally jumping back to our main characters. Of course, firstly, we're gonna have Matt just right after what had happened in the last book. His companions were interesting. It definitely brought out some interesting drama, but I just feel like they are a bit too long in terms of the length of the chapters. We also have Perrine. In the last book, he was so determined to save someone, but there was not really much follow-up after that. But back to this book, we are finally having some planning. With this, we also have a chapter from Feli. And honestly, I was a bit bored with these two POVs. I think we are quite familiar with the circumstances of what these two characters are facing. So do we really need such a long chapter about what Feli and her group are doing? Like I said many times about this book already, I always feel like there are so many unnecessary details in a chapter. At last, we of course have Elaine. Good old Elaine, thinking about and fancying about Ren all the time. But potentially what she is doing could be interesting. Only if we are going to have this as the main storyline in this book. Without much spoilers here, what Elaine doing in this book here is playing the House of Game or Game of House. So in order for her to win, she has to do so many planning, finding friends and allies to secure the position she is holding. Of course, in this game, there's gonna be other players, right? So how on earth can I remember every single one of them and what they are planning? Especially this group of players don't really necessarily associate with other characters in this world. Let's say the White or Black Tower, or maybe the Seanchan, or maybe the Eel. Like I said, I have trouble remember what is actually going on in the prologue. So coming to this game, how can I enjoy myself if I can't really get what is going on? I'm not sure we will get any more chapters from Elaine in this book, But if there's gonna be some more, I do feel like it could be a very interesting game. At this stage, with what I have just talked about, I understand why this book is like the slog of the slog in the series. The pacing and the writing didn't really balance well, and even though I am already 50% into the story, nothing really developed. I still got half of this slog left and I am really bored. So I really hope that I can finish this book in time before the end of March. So wish me luck. I have to push myself real hard here. So after a couple of days of very determined reading, I finally finished Crossroads of Twilight by Robert Jordan. And yes, the hardcover has also arrived. This last couple of days, I have been really busy other than like reading this slog. I also built this very hard to build office chair and then like set up a soundbar, but that soundbar wasn't working, so I have to return it and then set up the new one. And you know, setting up soundbar, it's not really that difficult, but I need to play with all the cables behind this TV. Quite time consuming, basically. So back to this book, Crossroads of Twilight. Defeating this massive slog is such an achievement. And if I am being honest here, I think that this is never going to be like a 5-star read. So my rating for this one is probably a high 1 or a very low 2. Let me explain here. The second half of this book feels to me definitely much better than the first half. The pacing is just slightly better and slightly easier to follow. There are also some potentially good storylines as well. At first, when I look up to this one, what this book is really about, quite a lot of reviews mentioning perspectives from Egwene. And finally, after maybe 55% into this book, we finally got our very first chapter from her. Egwene is in such a difficult position. Internally, everything is divided. Externally, they got a bigger threat. Let alone the position she is holding now is not really that secure. So her perspective is definitely as side-eye politics heavy. Maybe it will be about how they can unite their force, what should they plan for this attack, or maybe some very unexpected players on the board. There is just so much for Egwene to work on, and without much spoilers here, I found that the position she is holding now and what sort of people is advising her is so interesting. This new dynamic is really entertaining in a sense. I quite enjoy her chapters in this book, and I just wish we got some more from her. And the ending of her though in this book, girl got so much to learn to be that position. Then we also have maybe 1 or 2 chapters from Rand and Amin after what had happened in the last book, Winter's Heart. Finally, we got something from him. So I was expecting something deeper, something sort of grander from his perspectives. But in this book, he's like, hey everyone, I'm safe now. But I mean, look what you just did in the last book. I didn't mention this in the last update, but in the first 50% of this book, most of the chapters, how they end is like, because of what Rand has done in the ending of the last book, they were like, can you feel it? Can you sense it? Something big is happening out there. They're all looking in the same direction and saying very similar things, and that was low-key funny. This also creates some sort of domino effects, or maybe the lack of communication in an epic fantasy series, which makes Egwene has to make a difficult decision. So for all the storylines, for all the build-ups in the first half of the book, finally we come to this moment. I was so excited to see all these characters coming together again. With the current climate and what he has developed, what he has set up in the last couple of books, but he didn't really check on it much. So he can't really fight a two-sided war and has to make a challenging decision. Perrin, good old Perrin, still didn't really enjoy his chapters, but his last action in his last chapter did shock me. In here, I'm not sure how many of you guys feel the same if you have read this series. I kind of like Perrin more earlier in the series, and when his chapter hit that peak, if you have read the series, you will know what I mean. I was very invested in his chapters because I didn't expect he would be like this, but coming to now, he is giving me Hunt from the Crescent City. Hunt from Crescent City is like, I always want to have sex with, not Hunt, Bryce. Yes, I was right. Hunt always want to have sex with Bryce, and it is so much like Perrin in the story. Perrin always think about Fele. And people around Perrin is low-key a bit toxic, like Aram. I remember who Aram is and what sort of culture he is grown up with. And until that breaking point making him this person now, basically, he is just so aggressive. I completely understand that in a fantasy series, you can't always ask for a very perfect character. But all of these people just around Perrin and Perrin himself just makes his chapter really difficult to read. I don't find them enjoyable, basically. Matt, I would say he is still fun. What he's trying to do is to please the woman and how the viewing slowly come to life. But like I said many times already for this book, if the pacing could be slightly faster, I would definitely enjoy his chapters more. I think what creates the slog in this book is about the arrangement. In this book, we finally got all our folks in the same book, even though they are in different places. Let's say Ren, let's say Matt, let's say Perrin, let's say Elaine, let's say Egwene, all of them finally packed together in one single book. There are of course some other side characters, let's say in the prologue or maybe in between all these main characters. Majority of these main characters contribute to, according to the wiki page, more or less around 50% of the whole story. What I want to say here is that this kind of evenly screen time approach in a fantasy book just make the whole story or the whole book lack of progress. In the last couple of books before this slog, we can easily miss out one of the main characters as our POVs. Maybe in the whole book, you will never, and I mean never, see Perrin or Matt or even Ren got such a minimum screen time. But what it can achieve is a more consistent storyline. Everything feels like you can really feel the flow of the plot. Like I said, everyone in this book just doing their own things, they're barely together. As a reader, we got so much to learn, we got so much to remember from each of these characters. But without a focus or a goal, the plot can't really move. Our good old Perrin still hasn't solved the problem. Matt is still on the road. I'm not saying here this book should be bam, 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 solve this, done, 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 take. But if we are looking at all these POVs, maybe we can focus more on characters like Egwene or Perrin, or sometimes you can have Matt, instead of all packed together. If we focus more on those interesting storylines in this book, this one can be more entertaining. I think this problem also brought up by Brandon Sanderson before. From the transcript left by Robert Jordan, he did regret this kind of writing arrangement in this book. So I think we can say even the author don't really enjoy this book. Unfortunately, this one just missed the mark and possibly the worst book I have read in my life. This is a real slog to me. I am going to give this one just 1 star, which is exactly the opposite what I want to do in this vlog. The last book left on my March TBR is The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. I can't really predict would it be like a 5-star rate, but at least very obviously, it would definitely be much better than this one. So I guess I'll see you all in the next check-in where I will finish at least half of that book. So see you all later. Hello guys, welcome back. I am actually more than halfway through the Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. By the way, did I tell you this one is the third book of Miss Bond Era 2? If I haven't, now you know. Reading this one feels to me it is a bit of having a deja vu. It reminds me of finishing to Green Angel Tower and then jump to Rise of the Ranger. You can really see the difference between a fantasy book written maybe 20-30 years ago to now. This book, The Bands of Mourning, is like the last two books, really fast-paced, and we are still following the good old pair of good friends, Wax and Wing, which they play detectives works. Following with how the last book ends, this time Wax and Wing were asked to retrieve a very important artifact, which can potentially give you all the animacy powers. If you don't know what that term means, basically you are going to be very powerful in short term. So together with Wax's bride called Steris and her sister Marasi, they will travel and investigate where this important artifact can be. I am over halfway through this book and I can already tell you what a page turner this one is. This book begins with a flashback from Wax, which hints you what the future plot gonna be around. Then we are coming back to now with some actions from Wax. In a joking way, he will tell you what he needs to attend. So the beginning itself is really captivating already. I would say later in the book, it will follow this similar pattern. Wax and Wing were asked to do a task. In here, we will have more information about the world building, let's say the magic system. Now, this part I would say have some connection to Cosmere, so I don't think you can really skip Miss Bond Era 2 to jump to Stormlight Archive Book 5. After this lecture by Brandon Sanderson, we would have some actions. These characters will showcase their talents, what they can do in a fight. Followed by, we'll have some like peaceful, calming time to let the plot develop, to let the relationships to develop, to give you some sort of direction, what the plot gonna go for. In here, you can really tell how Brandon Sanderson gonna structure the plot. The length of a chapter or how long an event or a setting is just so on point to keep you just digging, to keep you reading. You would literally be like, I want to check out what's going to happen next. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Oh, wow. It is just like so hooked to the plot. You will be so eager to find out what's going to happen next. And all this arrangement just make you so hooked to the book and create this kind of page-turning experience. So far, I wouldn't really say this one is like a 5-star read yet. Yes, this book is engaging, this book is exciting, and there are some relationships that haven't been explored in the last two books, or some people would criticize this part. Now we have more depth to them. Wing is still Wing, always been so funny, always got his time to showcase his talents, and we also got a chance to explore the family relationship within Wax. I think it is still too early to say whether this one will be my next 5-star read, but at least I think this one is gonna be on par with Rise of the Ranger, this kind of really easy to read modern fantasy. Next time when you see me, I will probably finish this book already and wrap up this vlog, so stay tuned to see whether this one is gonna be my 5-star read. See you soon! Hi guys, this is the final wrap-up of this reading vlog, which means that I have already finished The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. Like I said in the last update, Brandon Sanderson can keep you hooked. The ending is so explosive and answers all the questions we have along the way. There are some puzzle-solving moments and giving Tomb Raider vibe. Trust me, when you read this one, you will just want to keep digging and find out what's gonna happen next. Of course, we're gonna have like a little twist by Brandon Sanderson, but I think this time is quite obvious because there's no other way to, twist around the story, basically. The ending, I would say, quote, predictable because there's no other way to really turn the story. It also leaves us some room for the last book, The Lost Metal. There are someone higher and above that need to be solved. It has been so long since I picked up Mistborn Era 1 and I may have forgotten some of the details. So when some of the characters tell us like what had happened in the past, I was a bit lost and can't really link up all the pieces together. But I think it is more about my own problem. I think I finished the whole Final Empire series maybe definitely before the pandemic, so it has been such a long time for me to get back to the Mistborn world. And I think it is the time for me to check out the Mistborn Secret History book. I think I may be able to find some answers in there. By the end of this book, there are some hints, some questions about what our characters gonna face, or maybe in terms of the whole Cosmere, what sort of problem are we looking at? So I can't wait to get to know more about that sort of problem, how it can link up the Cosmere as a whole. I also appreciate in this book, we are not just following the journey of Wax and Wing alone. I think this problem is more obvious in the first book, but as the story develops, we finally get some more moments from Steris and Marisi, Steris especially. To be honest, I don't really remember much about Steris before this book. She is like always in the background, and by the way, she is the bride of Wax. But this time she would join this expectation and showcase what sort of person she is. She would open up her feeling, her insecurity, and how she values herself or feel herself around this group of talented people. Same goes to Marisi. She finally got a chance to learn what sort of person she wanna become. All this sort of relationship-wise development, I would say is quite major in this book and it balances quite well, especially if you compare it to the last two books. But should I give this one a 5-star though? I always think rating for books is quite relative. Imagine I just finished Crossroads of Twilight by Robert Jordan, a book that is quite shit. Anything after it would be great because you have that comparison. But if I give, let me pick these books up. If I give to Green Angel Tower Part 2 a 3-star, and then Rise of the Ranger a 4-star, Crossroads of Twilight 1-star. In my mind, I think like the Bands of Mourning is slightly better than the Rise of the Ranger because of the character work and also the plot is more captivating and engaging. If I think about it deeply, I would say I will finally give the Bands of Mourning a 5-star. So it means I found a 5-star book in this vlog, meeting the purpose of this video. I honestly didn't expect it because I have heard so many reviews about Mistborn Era 2. It's not going to be as great as Mistborn Era 1, but at least at this point, 3 books into this series, it works. And also, if you've watched this far already, let me know, do you like this kind of longer form content? I haven't added any clips from this vlog yet, so I don't know exactly how long this video gonna be. But I honestly and definitely had fun making this video. A whole journey documenting me reading all the books from my March TBR and see whether can I find a 5-star read, rather than doing a standard weekly reading vlog. I honestly did have so much fun making this video, and the only problem is I need to pick up my phone and film myself reading all these books from time to time. Other than that, it's perfect. Without much spoilers, next month I think I am going to make another monthly-ish reading vlog documenting all the books I am going to read in April, because By the time you watch this video, you will probably know I will participate in the magical readathon of this year. So if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to my channel Tendency so you won't miss anything from me. I'll see you all real soon. Goodbye.